So what is DHCP? In this video, we are going to be going over what it is, how it's configured, and kind of just its definition. I'm planning on making this a very easy to understand basic guide on what DHCP is, and not to make it overly complicated and just something easy to explain to you guys. So by definition, DHCP is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. But what it really means and what it's doing is automatically assigning a computer its IP address. So really quick, let's go look at my computer here. And we're going to run a command just so we can see the IP configuration. That command is ipconfig. And here we can see it has an IP address, a subnet mask, and the gateway. The gateway is essentially your router. The IP address is a private IP that gets assigned to your computer, so anything on your internal network knows where it is and what it is. So the real question is, how did your computer get all of this information? And that is, namely, DHCP. Where does it come from? Normally, if you're just sitting at your home computer, your home router, which is provided by Verizon or AT&T or something like that, is going to be your DHCP server and issue all of your devices an IP address. Now, let's kind of just draw a little picture so you guys understand this. So this is your gateway. Let's call your gateway your home router. Again, issued by your ISP if you're at home. Okay, so here is your home router. I'll just name it route with my perfect handwriting. Now you're going to have inside of this network a PC, maybe even a TV that's on Wi-Fi. You'll have a phone. I'll just write P because I don't feel like writing all of that. And each one is assigned its own IP address. And this router here is the one issuing these devices IP address. And what this does is let them all talk to each other, let them talk to the router, and then the router helps it go out to the internet, okay? There's my perfect picture and explanation of what DHCP is, don't question me. And now for this example, we're using Windows computer. We're gonna go a little bit further and we're gonna look at our network settings. Now, our network settings here is pretty much the user interface of this information, but it is much easier to see and use and change, okay? So as you can see, we have our DNS servers. Now, DNS is what your computer generally speaks to, so it can change IP addresses into other readable data like websites. I'm not going to get too much into DNS, but it is part of DHCP. When we go to configure it, I can explain that a little bit more. But essentially, it's going to handle your IP address, your default gateway, and your DNS servers, okay? Now, if we ever want to change any of this information, in Windows 11, you can see the IP assignment is set to DHCP. That means it's getting all of this information automatically, including the DNS, okay? So we can edit it here and change all of this information. You can see here that I put a manual DNS in here. This is not actually using DHCP, either is this. This is something that I put in manually to talk to my domain controller. And that is something I covered in a previous video. You don't really need to worry about that. But normally, if you never configured anything manually, which is called a static assignment, your DNS servers are whatever your ISP decided your DNS servers are. So AT&T has its own address here. This is Google. So 8.8.8.8 is a Google DNS server. It is very reliable. Most DNS servers are also reliable, but this is just a nice little standard thing to always easily remember. And if you ever needed to statically assign a DNS, I would suggest something like this, which is Google. All right, so enough about this. This is pretty much just the rundown of how DHCP actually works on a device. What we're gonna do is configure DHCP, and that should allow you to understand it a little bit better. Now, keep in mind, DHCP can be configured on not just a Windows server, but it can be configured on different firewalls and things like that. This is just one example of where DHCP is. So I am going into here to configure this, so we can go over the types of options that you would have available to you. So here we're going to right click on our IPv4 and create a new scope. And this is just going to be our setup wizard, and it'll be everything that you need. So I'm going to just type in new. So this is the address range that your devices will get. Generally speaking, if you are at home, you will have a 192.168.1.1 address range. If you're in an office or a business and things like that, there'll be different types of address ranges, something like a 10.0.0.0, and then you can assign anything in between here. For us, right, for home networks, the most common thing to have a range for is basically from 1 to 254. Okay, this is your start and your end. That means all of the addresses in between here are able to get assigned from any device that talks to this DHCP server. For now, we're not going to go over subnet mask, but an easy way to understand this is that we are not allocating addresses in this octet, this octet, this octet, but we are assigning addresses in this one. So as you can see here, this is full, this is full, this is full. And the only thing we're actually using is the last octet, which is 1 to 254. And you can just leave all of this information here, and we're going to go next. Now, here you can add exclusions, which means you'll have a range of IP addresses that don't get used by DHCP. For example, if we were to do 192.168.1.2 and then 50, we add this range, that means anything within this range does not get assigned. So there'll be no computers or devices within this range. And I'll just leave that here because it's not a big deal. And now your router needs to be your gateway. Now remember what I showed you before, and I'll show you again. If you're at home and you do an IP config command in the command prompt, you can find your gateway, okay? Once again, this is essentially the router in your home or the router in a business. And when you configure DHCP, it is automatically going to assign the device a gateway. So it'll handle all of that stuff for you instead of your home router doing it. And then the last thing, which is your DNS server. Again, we talked about this, so hopefully you kind of kept up. You can actually do ipconfig/all to see your DNS servers. I assigned these statically to this device. But what's even better is if you get DHCP to apply to this computer, you don't actually have to statically assign anything because it'll do the DNS servers for you automatically, hence why DHCP is basically the automatic IP assignment protocol. So let's just go ahead and go into here, and we are going to assign it 8.8.4.4. And I am doing this just so we can see what happens when a computer gets its IP. So you can add more than 2. You can add as many as you want. I'm actually not sure if there's a limit. But generally speaking, you'll have 2 or more DNS servers. So if one fails for whatever reason, it'll kick over to the next one. So let's just go next through this. And we want to activate the DHCP server. And there we go. That's it. That's all we got to do. Now, in order to test this, I actually have to turn off my home router's DHCP server. That way it doesn't interrupt this other DHCP server. So now to show you guys another example, because I now have 2 DHCP servers running in my home network, I have to take a look at my home router's DHCP server and disable it so it doesn't interrupt the other one. So this is another example of a DHCP server, specifically on my home router. As you can see, it looks a little bit different, but the settings are generally exactly the same, right? So notice that we have DHCP server that is distributing IP addresses from 2 to 100. And all I want to do is turn this off and save it. And that way, these 2 DHCP servers don't have issues because there's 2 of them on the same network. So now all I want to show you is what happens when we renew our DHCP address and make our device pull from our newly created DHCP server. So to do something like this, we would use a command called ipconfig again, except we do a /release. And this removes the IP address of the computer, and we will go get another one as soon as we elevate. Again, ipconfig/release. Notice that we no longer have an IP address, and we do ipconfig/renew. And there we go. You'll notice that our IP address has changed. It is now above the .50 range, and it is in the range that we assigned it. And again, it pulled the correct default gateway. And that's really all there is to DHCP. Now your computers will get whatever IP addresses that you give a range to. You can also add in different types of scopes and reservations and assign MAC addresses to IP addresses. And things like that. But this is to give you guys a great understanding of how DHCP actually functions and maybe help you understand it from an IT perspective or things like troubleshooting it. So please like and subscribe if you liked the video and it has helped you at all. And I really appreciate you guys watching. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.